The final arena was simple. A perfect circle 100 meters across, flat floor, no cover, no tricks. No environmental hazards. Just two fighters, and whatever happened next. Sarah stood at one edge. Her body held together by medical technology and sheer willpower. 3 days of recovery, not nearly enough to heal the accumulated damage from 3 rounds of combat. Her ribs were taped. Her left arm moving stiffly from a shoulder that had been dislocated and reset. Cuts and burns covering most of her exposed skin. Across the arena stood Vexter, a sylph hunter who had dominated every previous round, who moved with the fluid grace of something born to kill, whose record showed 17 previous arena victories. The crowd was larger than Sarah had ever seen. Packed into every available space, millions more watching on broadcasts across the galaxy, all waiting to see whether the impossible human run would end here. Arena Master Kravik's voice boomed across the stadium. Final round, he announced. Single combat. No interference, fight until one cannot continue. He paused, and Sarah could hear something in his voice that hadn't been there at the start. Uncertainty. The human has defied expectation. Kravik continued. She has survived where 12 others died. She has used intelligence where strength failed. She has demonstrated that her species possesses qualities we possessed. I did not recognize. Sarah caught his eye across the distance. Saw the massive arena master looking at her with something that might have been respect. But this is the final test, he said. Strength against weakness. Natural predator against prey species, the way nature intended. The buzzer sound Vexter moved immediately, covering 10 meters in a blur of motion, limbs extending. Claws out, Sarah didn't move at all. She stood perfectly still and watched the sylph approach. Watched its pattern of movement, watched the way it favored its right side slightly. Watched the micro-adjustments in its gait. Vexter stopped 3 meters away, clearly confused by prey that didn't run. You should flee, it said. Voice harsh through the translator. This will be over quickly if you run. Slower if you stand. I'm not running, Sarah replied calmly. And this won't be quick. She began to circle slowly, moving around the edge of the combat zone, and Vexter circled with her, maintaining distance. You're injured, Sarah said conversationally. Round 2. You took a hit to your right rear limb. The translator called it your primary locomotion appendage. And it didn't heal quite right. Vexter's eyes narrowed. You're favoring it by 0.3 degrees. Sarah continued. Not enough to affect combat capability significantly, but enough that I can predict your movement patterns. This was psychological warfare, something humans had developed alongside language and tool use. The ability to get inside an opponent's head and make them doubt. Round 3. You killed the creature in your zone by ambush, Sarah went on. Single strike to the neural cluster. Perfect execution. But you had to wait 17 minutes for the right opportunity, which means you're patient, but you prefer overwhelming first strikes. She was assembling a profile, doing what human intelligence officers had done for centuries, analyzing, predicting, understanding the enemy better than they understood themselves. Vexter lunged suddenly, testing her, and Sarah's response was to drop and roll, not trying to block or counter, just avoiding. Too aggressive, she said, coming back to her feet. You're frustrated that I'm not fighting the way you expect. Fight properly. Vexter hissed. Stand in combat. No, Sarah said simply, because proper fighting gets me killed. And I didn't survive 3 rounds to die because I followed someone else's rules. They circled again, and Sarah watched the crowd reactions on the peripheral screens. Saw millions of beings leaning forward, saw betting odds shifting in real time. The galaxy was learning something it didn't want to know. Humans were predators. Just not the kind that looked like predators. Humans were social predators. Pack hunters who used coordination and intelligence. Humans were endurance predators who ran prey into exhaustion, and humans were psychological predators who weaponized understanding, who turned knowledge into advantage, who made you doubt yourself until you made mistakes. You know what's interesting about self-physiology? Sarah asked, still circling. Your species evolved in high-gravity environments, which means you're incredibly strong, but you fatigue faster than low-gravity species. She was lying. She had no idea if that was true, but the uncertainty in Vexter's posture told her the attack was working. Round 1. You completed the gauntlet in 3rd place, Sarah continued. Fast time, but not first. Which means you're good, but not exceptional at navigation under pressure. Vexter attacked again, more committed this time. And Sarah didn't have the speed or strength to fully dodge. Claws raked across her left side, and Sarah felt ribs crack, felt blood flow, felt pain explode through her torso. She stumbled backwards, but didn't fall. Didn't stop talking. Good hit, she gasped. That's 2 broken ribs, adds to the 3 from round 2. Vexter pressed the advantage, and Sarah gave ground. Her tactical mind, working even through pain. Human pain tolerance was remarkable. Evolved to let injured hunters keep functioning, keep contributing to the pack even when wounded. You're wondering why I'm still standing, Sarah said between gasps. Species classification says humans should collapse from shock. Another strike and Sarah's left arm went numb. Adrenaline, she explained. Still backing away. Evolutionary adaptation lets us fight or run past normal limits. Vexter was winning and knew it. Moving in for the kill, Sarah stopped retreating. But here's the thing about human psychology, she said. We're social creatures. We understand fear. She met Vexter's eyes directly. And right now, you're afraid. I am not. Vexter started. You are, Sarah interrupted. Because I should be dead. 12 humans died here. I survived. I shouldn't have survived round 3. I did. Now you're wondering, what if I survive this? The psychological strike landed, and Sarah saw it. Saw Vexter hesitate for just a fraction of a second. She attacked, not with skill or grace or natural weapons. She attacked with desperation and improvisation and absolute commitments. Sarah grabbed the piece of debris from the arena floor, some kind of broken equipment, and swung it like a club. Vexter blocked easily, but the attack forced it backwards. Sarah kept pressing, kept swinging, kept moving forward despite her injuries. Humans don't quit, she said. We're too stupid or too stubborn to know when we're beaten. She changed tactics mid-attack, throwing the debris instead of swinging, forcing Vexter to. Then Sarah charged, closing distance, getting inside the sylph's reach where its longer limbs were less effective. They grappled, and Sarah had no illusions about strength. Vexter was far stronger, but humans wrestled. Humans understood leverage. Humans knew how to use an opponent's strength against them. Sarah found a joint in Vexter's limb structure and twisted. Not with muscle, but with technique. Something popped, and Vexter screamed. They separated, and both fighters were damaged now. Both bleeding, both running on reserves they didn't have. This is why humans conquered Earth, Sarah said, her voice hoarse. Not because we're strong, because we refused to stop. Vexter lunged again, and Sarah didn't dodge fast enough. Impact drove her to the ground, claws finding flesh. Pain beyond anything she had experienced. Her shoulder dislocated again with a sound like breaking wood. Her vision went gray at the edges. But Sarah's hand found Vexter's neck. Found a pressure point that human anatomy texts had identified. And she squeezed with everything remaining. The sylph's eyes went wide. They stayed frozen like that, locked together, both dying. Both refusing to let go, submit, Sarah whispered. Or we both die here. Never. Vexter hissed. Then die, Sarah replied. She felt consciousness slipping, felt her body shutting down. felt Vexthor's body doing the same. The crowd was screaming, but Sarah couldn't hear them anymore. Everything was narrowing to this moment. This choice, this absolute refusal to quit Vexthor's grip, loosened first. Not much. Just a fraction. But enough. Sarah held on. Vexthor collapsed. Sarah held on. Medical drones descended. Sarah held on until she felt Vexthor's pulse stop. Until she was absolutely certain. Then she let go and fell backwards onto the arena floor. The crowd noise was deafening. Arena Master Kravik's voice cut through the chaos. "The human wins," he said. And there was wonder in his voice. "Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chan advances." He paused. "No, not advances. She has won. She has completed the crucible. She has done what no human before her accomplished." Sarah tried to sit up and couldn't. Her body finally betraying her. Systems crashing after running beyond all reasonable limits. Kravik appeared above her, his massive form blocking out the arena lights. "Why?" he asked, simply. "Why continue when any rational being would submit?" Sarah managed a blood-stained smile. "I told you to watch me," she whispered. Understanding bloomed in the arena. Master's eyes. "The debt is paid," he announced to the stadium. "Earth's obligation to the Vrok Dominion satisfied in full. This human has proven." He stopped, searching for words. "She has proven that strength is not everything." He finally said that intelligence, endurance, adaptability, and sheer determination can overcome advantages that seem insurmountable. The crowd's reaction was mixed, some cheering, some angry, some simply stunned. Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor, and Sarah let them work. Let them stabilize her failing systems. The biodome stretched out before Sarah like a fever dream. Dense jungle vegetation that wasn't from any planet she recognized. Twisted trees with bark that moved when you looked away. Pools of water that steamed and bubbled with chemicals that would probably dissolve human flesh on contact. Round 3 was solo survival. 4 fighters dropped into 4 separate sections of this hostile environment. Sections that would randomly merge and force confrontation. Last one breathing wins. Sarah's ribs still ached despite 3 days of accelerated healing. Synthetic tissue holding her together where natural tissue had torn. And every breath reminded her that she was injured going into a round designed to kill healthy fighters. The biodome section she occupied was designated Zone Gamma, and the initial scan had identified 37 different species of predator, ranging from small pack hunters the size of dogs to something the scanner labeled simply as Apex Class Threat. She had been tracking the Apex for 2 hours now, staying ahead of it, avoiding direct confrontation, trying to understand its behavior, the render. That's what the arena database called. It was essentially evolution's answer to the question, what if we made something that existed only to kill? 12 feet tall when it stood on its hind legs, armored in overlapping plates that looked like obsidian, claws that could tear through reinforced steel, acid blood that burned through organic matter, and a hunting instinct that had been refined over millions of years. Most fighters who encountered a render in previous tournaments had tried to fight it. All of them had died. Sarah was doing something different, something that would have seemed insane to any species that relied on strength or natural weapons, something that only made sense if you understood how human ancestors had hunted on the African savanna. She was running it down, not running away. Running it down, leading it on a chase that had been going for hours now, never letting it catch her, but never letting it rest. The render was fast in bursts, could sprint at speeds that Sarah couldn't match. But those bursts cost energy, and after each sprint, it needed to recover. Humans didn't sprint. Humans jogged. Humans maintained a steady pace that could be sustained for hours, for days if necessary. Sarah's feet found rhythm on the jungle floor. Step, breathe. Step, breathe. the meditation of distance running that she had learned during military training and perfected during her years of service. Behind her, perhaps 50 meters back, the render crashed through vegetation, following her scent, following heat signatures, following the trail of a creature that refused to stop moving. She had mapped this section of the biodome during the first hour, understanding the terrain, finding water sources, identifying which plants were toxic and which were merely dangerous. Now she led the render in a wide circuit, moving through areas where the ground was soft and required more energy to traverse, where thorn vegetation would scrape its armor and cause minor irritation, where the temperature was slightly higher and forced its metabolism to work harder for cooling. Death by 1,000 small inconveniences. Her lungs burned and her legs ached, and her ribs sent stabbing pains through her torso with every step. But Sarah had learned long ago that pain was just information. Just the body's way of saying this is hard. Hard wasn't impossible. The render roared behind her, a sound that shook the jungle canopy and sent smaller predators fleeing. And Sarah adjusted her pace slightly faster because the roar meant frustration, meant her strategy was working. Sarah's uniform was soaked with sweat, her body dehydrated despite drinking from streams when she passed them, her muscles screaming for rest. The render was slower now. She could hear it in the pattern of its pursuit. Less explosive charges and more sustained following good. She led it toward a section of jungle where the canopy was thick enough to provide shade, where she could cool down while keeping the render in the open where sunlight would add to its heat load. Sarah had to stop and vomit, her body rejecting water or food, or maybe just protesting the sustained abuse. And she heard the render close distance during those precious seconds of weakness. She forced herself upright and started running again. Slower now, but still moving. Behind her, the render's breathing was audible, heavy and labored, not the effortless predator from hour 1, hour 5. The sun was setting in whatever simulated sky the biodome used. And Sarah knew the render would have advantages in darkness, better night vision, better heat sensing. She needed to end this before full dark. She led it toward a rocky area she had scouted earlier, terrain that would be hard on its feet, that would require careful movement instead of charging pursuit. The render followed, and Sarah could hear it stumbling now, could hear its claws scraping on stone, could hear exhaustion in every step. No creature was designed for this, for pursuit that never ended, for a prey animal that refused to either fight or flee, but instead chose option 3. Outlast, and the biodome shuddered and alarms blared. Section. Merge. Sarah's zone was combining with one of the other zones, which meant another fighter was about to enter her territory, which meant the render was no longer her only problem. She climbed a rocky outcrop that gave her a vantage point and watched as walls literally dissolved, as two zones became one, as a massive figure entered from the newly opened boundary. Thorok, the Kragath warrior, looked battered but alive, his armor scorched and cracked, evidence of combat with whatever nightmare had inhabited his zone. He saw Sarah and altered course toward her, clearly intending to eliminate the weak opponent first. Then he saw the render. Sarah watched understanding dawn on the big warrior's face. The human wasn't just sitting there exhausted. She was sitting there exhausted with an Apex-class predator 15 meters away. The render saw Thorok and made a decision that sealed its fate. Fresh prey. Unwounded prey. Prey that wasn't running. It charged the Kragath with whatever strength remained in its exhausted body. Thorok braced for impact, clearly planning to use his strength and armor to survive, and then counterattack. Sarah knew what would happen next, because she had studied the render's anatomy during her pursuit. The acid blood when Thorok's claws pierced the render's hide, when the render's own claws found gaps in the Kragath's armor. Both creatures screamed. The render's blood burned through Thorok's natural armor like water through paper. Thorok's strength was sufficient to crack the render's plating, but that just released more acid. Blood, they were killing each other. Sarah stayed on her rocky outcrop and watched two apex predators destroy each other in a death spiral neither could escape. The render fell first. Its exhausted body, unable to sustain the damaged thorax, fell second. Acid burns covering 40% of his body. His earlier wounds reopened by the combat. He looked up at Sarah with eyes that showed shock and perhaps understanding. "You," he managed to say, voice ruined by pain. "You hunted it?" "Yes," Sarah replied simply. "For hours." "Yes, humans hunt by," he coughed, blood appearing on his lips. "By running. We evolved chasing prey until it collapsed," Sarah confirmed. "We're not strong. We're not fast, but we don't stop." Thorik made a sound that might have been laughter. "Terrifying," he said. And then his eyes went dark. Sarah sat for a moment in silence, honoring a warrior who had protected her in round 2, who had called her commander, who had died fighting when he could have died running. Then she climbed down from her perch, because 2 fighters remained, and the arena was still active. She found water and drank deeply, found edible vegetation, and forced herself to eat despite nausea. Gave her body fuel because the fight wasn't over somewhere in this merged zone. One more fighter was alive. Sarah checked her wrist scanner and saw movement signatures to the north. Erratic movement that suggested injury or exhaustion. She moved that direction, her body protesting every step. Her military training the only thing keeping her functional. What she found was one of the Sylph from her round 2 team. Badly wounded, missing one limb, leaking fluid that might have been blood. It saw her and hissed. "Ready to fight or ready to die fighting?" "I'm not going to kill you," Sarah said quietly, the Sylph's eyes, multiple colors swirling, focused on her with confusion. "One of us must die," it said. "Arena rules." "You're already dying," Sarah pointed out, looking at the severity of its wounds. 60 seconds. Maybe 90. The Sylph settled back against a tree, accepting this assessment. "You fought well. Human," it said. "Your tactics in round 2 were efficient. You followed orders well." Sarah replied. "That's harder than people think." They sat in silence for a moment. Prey species and predator species, both far from home, both caught in a game they didn't design. The Sylph's breathing slowed, became irregular. "Tell them," it said. "Tell the watching species that humans are not weak." "I will," Sarah promised. The Sylph's eyes went dark, and Sarah was alone in the biodome with corpses of creatures that had been stronger, faster, better armed. The arena announcement echoed through the dome. "Round 3 complete," Arena Master Kravik's voice said. And he sounded different now, less certain, less mocking. "The human advances to the final round." Sarah looked up at the cameras she knew were everywhere. Looked at the watching millions. "Persistence," she said quietly, knowing they could hear her. "That's humanity's weapon. We persist." Then she sat down and waited for the medical drones, because her body, the holding cell for round 2 survivors, was different from the first one. Larger and cleaner, as if the arena administration had decided that fighters who made it this far deserved slightly better accommodations before they died. Sarah sat on a metal bench and assessed her teammates, because that's what they were now, whether they liked it or not. 5 fighters divided into one team, 5 others on the opposing team. And only one team would advance. The massive Kragath warrior called itself Thorik and stood nearly 11 feet tall, all muscle and bone plates, and barely contained aggression. And it had made very clear through growls and postures that it considered Sarah the weak link. The 2 Sylph moved like a liquid shadow, their names unpronounceable to human vocal cords, their eyes constantly shifting between colors as they evaluated threats and calculated killing strikes. The crystalline being called itself Zun, and communicated through harmonic vibrations that the neural translator struggled to interpret accurately. But Sarah gathered it was some kind of logic-based species that viewed combat as a mathematical problem to be solved. They were staring at her now, all four of them, clearly wondering why the arena administration had saddled them with dead weight. "We fight in 20 minutes," Thorak rumbled, his voice like an avalanche. "The human will die in the first engagement. But perhaps her death will distract the enemy team long enough for us to gain advantage." Sarah stood up slowly, keeping her movements non-threatening, keeping her injured shoulder relaxed even though it still ached despite the medical treatment. "Or," she said quietly, "you could listen to me for 5 minutes and maybe we all survive." One of the sylph made a hissing sound that the translator rendered as laughter. "Humans have no pack tactics," it said. "Your species evolved as lone hunters." "Wrong," Sarah replied. And now she let some steel enter her voice because incorrect assumptions got people killed. Humans evolved as cooperative hunters. Humans developed language specifically to coordinate group activities. Humans created civilizations by working together. She pulled up a holographic display from her wrist unit, accessing the arena's public database of previous round 2 matches. "Look at the last 50 matches," she continued. "Teams that coordinate their attacks win 73% of the time. Teams that fight as individuals lose even when they have superior strength." Zhen's crystalline form hummed with interest, harmonic shifting to what the translator called analytical mode. "The human presents logical argument," it said. "Coordination increases survival probability. Coordination requires trust," Thorak growled. "Why should we trust a weak creature?" Sarah met the Kradeth's eyes and didn't blink. "Because I already survived what 12 other humans couldn't," she said. "Because I'm still here when stronger fighters are dead. Because intelligence beats strength when strength doesn't know how to think." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant roar of the crowd in the arena above them. Finally, surprisingly, it was one of the sylph who spoke. "What do you propose?" Human Sarah pulled up a map of the Round 2 arena. A massive war zone environment with multiple levels, cover positions, and tactical choke points. "The other team will split up or charge together. Those are the 2 standard strategies," she explained. "If they split up, we hunt them individually using coordinated ambush tactics. If they charge together, we fall back to defensible positions and force them to come at us through kill zones." She highlighted specific locations on the map. "Thorak, you're our heavy fighter. You hold the center and draw their attention," she said. "Sylph hunters, you use your camouflage to flank and strike from unexpected angles. Ziyan, you're our ranged attacker with whatever energy projection you can manage. And you?" Thorak demanded. "What does the weak human do while we fight?" "I watch everything and tell you what to do next." Sarah replied simply, "I'm your tactical command. I see the whole battlefield while you're focused on individual combat." Zhuan hummed again, longer this time. "Processing. Human military history shows extensive development of command structure," it said. "Humans sacrifice individual strength to develop leaders who coordinate group action." "It's a weakness," Thorak insisted. "It's why humans conquered their entire planet," Sarah shot back. "Not through being the strongest or the fastest or the most armored, but through working together better than anything else that lived there." The preparation time ticked down and Sarah used every second to drill her team, to explain formations and fallback positions and communication protocols. The sylph adapted quickest. Their species apparently familiar with coordinated hunting, even if they didn't do it often. Zahn processed everything with crystal clear logic, asking questions until it understood the full tactical picture. Thorak remained skeptical, but agreed to try, mostly because the alternative was dying alone. Then the arena gates opened and 5 fighters walked into hell. The battlefield was a ruined city environment. Buildings reduced to skeletal frameworks, streets cratered and broken, Perfect for ambush or for getting trapped and killed. Sarah's team moved in formation. Thorak at center, Sylph ranging wide on flanks. Zun positioned for maximum firing lines. Sarah slightly behind and elevated where she could see multiple approaches. The enemy team came in fast and aggressive. 3 Kragath warriors moving in a wedge formation. 1 armored Thone, and something that looked like a living mass of tentacles and teeth. Sarah's assessment was immediate. Standard overwhelming force strategy. They expected to steamroll through superior strength. Thorak, hold position but give ground slowly, she ordered through the team come. Sylph, circle around to grid reference Gamma 4, Zun. Target the tentacle thing when I give the signal. The enemy charged and Thorak met them. His massive frame absorbing impacts that would have pulverized a human. And Sarah watched the pattern of their attack. Watched how the 3 Kragath coordinated. Zen, fire now, she commanded. A beam of crystalline energy lanced across the battlefield and caught the tentacle creature mid-lunge. Its biology apparently vulnerable to coherent light. And it shrieked and recoiled. Sylph, leftmost Kragath. Simultaneous strike from both sides. The 2 Sylph hunters materialized from camouflage on either side of the enemy warrior, their claws finding weak points in its armor, and when it turned to fight one, the other struck from behind. The first enemy went down. Thorak, disengage and fall back to position Delta 7. The Kragath warrior wanted to stay and fight. Sarah could see it in his posture. But he followed orders and retreated to a choke point where the enemy would have to come at him through a narrow passage. The battle evolved into a flowing dance of attack and retreat. Ambush and counter-ambush, and Sarah called every move. Processing information faster than the enemy team could adapt, she saw patterns they couldn't see, understood momentum shifts, predicted their responses based on species-typical behaviors. When 2 enemy Kragath tried to flank around the left side, she had the Sylph waiting for them. When the Thone attempted to use its armor to push through the center, she coordinated all 3 attackers to focus fire and overwhelm its defenses. The tentacle creature proved problematic, regenerating damage quickly. But Sarah noticed it flinched from bright light, so she had Zun maintain constant illumination while the Sylph used hit-and-run tactics. 15 minutes into the battle, her team had eliminated 3 enemies with 0 casualties. Thorak was fighting now with something that looked like enthusiasm. Following orders and watching them work, the Sylph moved with precision, trusting Sarah's tactical callouts. Zun processed battlefield data and adjusted firing solutions based on her commands. Then Sarah took a hit. She had been focused on the tactical display, watching enemy positions, and didn't see the Kragath that had broken through their perimeter until it was almost on top of her. Its claws raked across her ribs, and Sarah felt something tear. Felt pain explode through her torso. Felt blood soaking into her uniform. The Kragath raised its arm for a killing blow. Protect the commander. Thorak's voice boomed across the battlefield, and the massive warrior slammed into the enemy with enough force to crack stone. Sarah stumbled backwards. One hand pressed to her bleeding side, and her vision swam, but she forced it to clear because her team needed her. The pain was intense. Probably broken ribs, definitely serious bleeding. But humans had evolved to fight through injuries that would incapacitate other species. Adrenaline flooded her system, and Sarah's mind sharpened instead of failing. Thorak, pin it down, Sylph converge on my position. Zun, prepare maximum intensity burst. Her team responded instantly, and the Kragath that had wounded her disappeared under coordinated assault. Sarah sat down hard, still clutching her ribs, and continued calling tactics even as her blood pooled on the arena floor. 2 enemies left. Standard encirclement pattern. Thorak takes point. Sylph support. Zun provides covering fire. The final 2 enemies realized what they were facing. Not 5 individuals, but one coordinated unit, and they broke. Tried to retreat, tried to survive. The arena didn't allow retreat when the buzzer sounded to signal end of combat. 4 fighters stood alive. Thorak, both Sylph, and Sarah was sitting propped against rubble, barely conscious. Her hand still pressed to her wounded ribs. Medical drones swarmed immediately, but Thorak reached her first, his massive hand surprisingly gentle as he examined her. The arena floor felt wrong under Sarah's feet. Too smooth and too warm, like walking on skin instead of stone. And she had exactly 30 seconds before the gauntlet began. 19 other fighters spread across the starting platform, each one a nightmare made flesh. The Kragath warriors with their bone spurs and natural armor that could deflect small arms fire. The Sylph hunters whose limbs bent in ways that defied biology and whose skin shifted colors to match their surroundings. The Thone soldiers encased in shells that looked like living metal above them. Surrounding them on all sides, the stadium seating rose up in impossible tiers, packed with thousands of alien spectators who had paid enormous sums to watch creatures kill each other for sport. Sarah had spent 3 days studying footage, learning patterns, understanding that the gauntlet was designed to favor certain attributes: speed, strength, natural defenses, all the things humans notably lacked. The countdown began. Holographic numbers floating in the air above them: 10, 9, 8. She noticed something the others didn't. While they were focused on the exit point 2 kilometers away across the maze, she was watching the floor itself, watching the seams where panels didn't quite align perfectly, watching the slight discoloration that might indicate pressure sensors. 3, 2, 1. The buzzer sounded like a scream, and the other fighters exploded into motion. The Kragath using pure speed to charge forward. The Sylph leaping to wall-mounted handholds. The Thone moving with surprising agility despite their bulk. Sarah did something that would have gotten her killed in actual combat. She stopped moving entirely for 15 seconds. She stood perfectly still on the starting platform while chaos erupted ahead. And those 15 seconds bought her the most valuable commodity in the universe: information. The first Kragath triggered a plasma trap and disappeared in a flash of superheated light. There and then gone, reduced to component atoms before it. Could even scream a Sylph hunter. Touched a wall panel that looked safe and found out it wasn't when 20,000 volts turned its nervous system into slag. The Thone soldier thought its armor would protect it from the crushing mechanism that descended from the ceiling, and learned too late that armor meant nothing when the pressure exceeded 50 tons per square inch. Sarah mapped it all in her head, building a mental model of the gauntlet's layout, understanding that the designers had created patterns, predictable sequences that repeated every 45 seconds. She moved then, not with the explosive speed of the Kragath or the fluid grace of the Sylph, but with the steady, measured pace of a human persistence hunter, the kind of pace her ancestors had used to chase prey across African savannas until it collapsed from exhaustion. The first obstacle was a corridor that narrowed progressively, forcing larger fighters to slow down or get stuck. And Sarah slipped through it easily, while a Kragath behind her struggled and cursed. Ahead she could hear combat, fighters encountering each other in the maze and deciding to eliminate competition early. And Sarah altered her route to avoid those confrontations, because fighting now was stupid when the arena itself was doing such an efficient job of killing people. She found a dead Sylph in a corridor, its body showing no obvious wounds. And Sarah stopped to investigate despite the time pressure, because understanding how things died was how you stayed alive. Poison gas, released from vents in the ceiling when the Sylph had stepped on a specific floor panel. Sarah memorized the panel's appearance and moved on, stepping carefully around similar-looking tiles. The gauntlet shifted then, walls literally moving, corridors closing off and new ones opening. And Sarah adapted faster than the stronger fighters, because humans were good at pattern recognition, good at adjusting to changing circumstances. good at surviving when everything went wrong. She encountered her first direct obstacle when a massive Thone warrior blocked the only path forward. Its shell covered in scorch marks from a trap it had survived. Its eyes fixed on her with predatory intent. It said something in a language Sarah didn't speak, but the meaning was clear enough. Easy prey. Weak thing, die now. The Thone charged, and Sarah didn't try to fight it. Didn't try to match strength against strength. Because that was how you lost. Instead, she ran backwards, keeping just ahead of it, leading it toward a section of corridor she had identified earlier. A section where the plasma traps activated in a specific sequence. The Thone was faster than her, but not smarter than her. And when Sarah dove through a gap in the pattern, the creature behind her didn't see the danger until the plasma discharge caught it full in the chest. It screamed, a sound like metal tearing, and then it was gone. Sarah kept moving, her lungs burning now because humans might be endurance hunters. But that didn't mean running was painless. And she could feel her body starting to protest the sustained effort. Sweat soaked her prison uniform and made her skin slippery. Made her hands uncertain on the handholds. She used to pull herself up a vertical shaft while laser tripwires hummed in deadly patterns around her. She passed 3 more dead fighters. Then 4. Then 5. The exit was close now. She could see it through a transparent section of wall. Could see 2 other fighters already approaching it from different angles. A sylph and something she didn't recognize that looked like an insect, the size of a motorcycle. Sarah calculated their routes, and realized they would all arrive at approximately the same time unless she did something to change the equation. There was a control panel on the wall, probably meant for arena maintenance. And Sarah had about 5 seconds to decide whether touching it was suicide or opportunity. She touched it. The panel accepted her input, responding to simple logic commands. And Sarah quickly understood what she was looking at. Trap controls, door controls. The ability to manipulate this section of the gauntlet. She sealed off the corridor the insect thing was using, forcing it to backtrack and find another route, buying herself crucial seconds. Then she sprinted for the exit with everything she had left, legs pumping, arms swinging, her body moving in the efficient, running form that human evolution had perfected over millions of years. The sylph saw her coming and moved to intercept, clearly planning to kill her before she could cross the finish line. Sarah feinted left, went right, used every dirty trick she had learned in hand-to-hand combat training. And when the sylph's claws raked across her shoulder, she didn't stop, didn't slow down. Just kept running with blood streaming down her arm. Pain was information, nothing more. And right now the information was clear. Injured, but functional. Keep moving. Survive. She crossed the threshold 7th out of 10 survivors and immediately collapsed. Her body finally acknowledging that she had just run 2 kilometers through a death maze while operating on adrenaline and fear. Medical drones descended, scanning her injuries. And Sarah forced herself upright, despite their protests, because showing weakness now would undo everything she had just accomplished. The arena screen showed her face, showed her bloody shoulder, showed the moment she had used the control panel to seal off a corridor. And the crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheering for her cleverness. Others angry that she had cheated by using technology. Arena Master Kravik appeared on the central screen, his expression unreadable. "The human survives round 1, he announced. And there was something in his voice that might have been surprise or might have been respect or might have been anger. She advances to round 2 along with 9 other fighters. Sarah looked up at the screen, at Kravik's image, and allowed herself a small smile because she had just done what 12 other humans had failed to do. She had survived. The crowd noise swelled. Thousands of voices arguing and cheering and placing bets on how long this unexpected variable would last. As medical drones patched her shoulder with synthetic skin and injected her, with something that made the pain recede to a distant throb. Sarah watched the screens, showing highlights from her run through the gauntlet. She saw herself stopping at the start, saw the calculations in her eyes, saw the moment she led the Thone warrior into the plasma trap. The commentators were analyzing her performance, trying to understand how a species with no natural advantages had outperformed creatures literally designed for combat. Humans are persistence hunters, one commentator said. A being that looked like a floating jellyfish. They evolved to chase prey over long distances until it collapsed from exhaustion. They evolved to solve problems rather than overpower them. That won't help her in round 2, another commentator replied. This one, sounding skeptical. Direct combat favors the strong. Sarah closed her eyes and let the medical drones work. Let her body rest for the brief time she had before the next round began. Round 1 had been about survival through intelligence. Round 2 would be about something else entirely. Something she hoped the galaxy wasn't ready for. Humans fighting as a coordinated unit. Humans using tactical thinking. Humans proving that the pack was stronger than the individual predator. She had survived. Now she had to win. The transport ship rattled as it docked with Karvesh Station, and Sarah Chen felt the vibrations through the metal floor beneath her feet, through the chains that bound her wrists, through every fiber of her being that screamed this was wrong. She stood among 40 other prisoners. Specimens really, collected from a dozen different worlds across the galaxy, and each one looked more dangerous than the last. Hulking creatures with natural armor plating, beings with 6 arms tipped in razor claws, something that looked like living crystal that hummed with barely contained energy. The airlock hissed open and the smell hit her first. Blood and ozone and something sour that might have been fear or might have been death itself. Old death, recent death, death that soaked into the walls of this place and never quite left. Move, barked the rock guard, its voice like gravel grinding against steel. And the prisoners shuffled forward into a corridor that seemed designed to make them feel small, insignificant. Temporary Sarah was 34 years old and had spent 12 of those years in Earth's military, rising to lieutenant commander through skill and determination rather than luck or connections. And she had seen combat on 3 different continents during the resource wars, had led tactical operations that saved thousands of lives, had earned 17 commendations and the respect of everyone who served under her. None of that mattered here 6 months ago. Earth had lost a border skirmish with the Vrok Dominion, a nothing conflict over a mining station that humanity didn't even need. But the Vrok had superior weapons and superior numbers, and Earth's government had been forced to accept surrender terms that included this. Entertainment specimens for the arena she had volunteered immediately, taking the place of Private Martinez, who had a daughter, taking the place of Corporal Johnson, who had just gotten married, taking the place of any of the young soldiers, who still had their whole lives ahead of them. The corridor opened into a massive processing chamber, and Sarah's breath caught despite herself because the scale of it was overwhelming. A space large enough to hold a city block. Walls that curved up and up into darkness. Screens everywhere showing highlights from previous arena matches. Aliens dying in 1,000 different creative ways. Form lines. Another guard shouted, and the prisoners were herded into groups based on species, which left Sarah standing alone because she was the only human in this batch. The only human foolish enough or desperate enough or brave enough to be here. The processing moved quickly and efficiently, like a factory. Like an abattoir, each prisoner scanned and cataloged and fitted with a neural tracker that would monitor their vital signs and broadcast their deaths in glorious detail to the viewing audience. Sarah watched a massive creature that looked like a bear mixed with a scorpion get processed ahead of her. Watched it snarl and snap at the technicians who worked with casual indifference. who had clearly done this thousands of times before. Then it was her turn. The arena master himself came to process her, which was unusual enough that other guards stopped to watch. And Sarah understood why when she saw him. Kravik was easily 8 feet tall with scaled skin the color of dried blood. Cybernetic enhancements covering half his face and most of one arm. Eyes that glowed with an inner amber light. He looked at her datapad, then at her. Then back at the datapad, as if checking whether this could possibly be correct. "Human?" he said. And his voice carried across the entire chamber because every screen had suddenly focused on this moment. On this interaction. "Yes," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. Keeping her fear locked down tight where it couldn't betray her. Kravik made a sound that might have been laughter but sounded more like a landslide. "In 300 years of arena operation, 12 humans have entered the crucible," he said. Clearly speaking for the cameras now, for the audience. Playing to the crowd. All 12 died in round 1, most within the first 5 minutes. Because humans are soft-skinned creatures with no natural defenses, no armor, no venom, no claws. Nothing but fragile flesh and misplaced pride. The other aliens in the processing chamber joined his laughter. The sound building and echoing until it felt like the walls themselves were mocking her. Sarah waited for the noise to die down. Waited until Kravik's glowing eyes focused on her again. Waited until she was certain every camera in the facility was recording. "No human survives round 1. Kravik declared, making it sound like a law of nature. Like gravity or entropy or death itself. Sarah met his eyes and didn't blink, didn't look away. Didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing fear. "Watch me," she said. The words hung in the air for a moment. And then the laughter started again, but it sounded different this time, more uncertain. As if some of the aliens recognized what they were seeing. A human being who refused to accept the obvious. Who looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. Kravik's expression shifted. Something flickering across his features too quickly for Sarah to identify. And then he waved her toward the technicians. "Process the dead woman walking," he ordered. The neural tracker felt like ice against her skin as they attached it. Felt like a brand marking her as arena property. And Sarah forced herself not to flinch because weakness here would be remembered. Would be replayed on every screen for millions of viewers. The technicians worked in silence, clearly uncomfortable with her calm demeanor, clearly expecting her to break down or beg or do something other than stand there with quiet dignity when they finished. Sarah was herded with the other prisoners toward the holding cells, massive cages that would house them until the tournament began in 3 days. And as she walked, she could feel eyes on her from every direction. The other prisoners watched her with curiosity or contempt or hunger, already calculating how quickly they could kill her when the games began, already dismissing her as no threat at all, a Kragath warrior. 10 feet of muscle and natural armor plating deliberately stepped into her path, clearly expecting her to flinch or move or show some sign of intimidation. Sarah walked around him without changing her pace, without acknowledging the challenge. Because she had nothing to prove to anyone here except herself. Her cell was small and cold and smelled like previous occupants who had never left. And Sarah sat down on the metal bench and finally allowed herself to feel the fear that had been building since the transport ship left Earth. She was going to die here. Probably, almost certainly, because the math was simple and brutal. 12 humans had entered the arena. 12 humans had died in round 1, and nothing about Sarah Chun made her special enough to break that pattern. Except she had volunteered for this knowing the odds. Had walked into this place with her eyes open. And somewhere deep in her core was a stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had carried her through every impossible situation she had ever faced. The screens in her cell flickered to life, showing highlights from previous tournaments, and Sarah watched carefully, studying the arena layout, the types of challenges, The ways that previous fighters had succeeded or failed, she had 3 days to prepare. 3 days to learn everything she could. 3 days to find an edge that might keep her alive for just a little longer than those 12 humans who came before. 3 days until the arena master learned what it meant when a human said, "Watch me." 3 days until the galaxy discovered that humanity's greatest weakness, having no natural weapons, no armor, no advantages at all, was also humanity's greatest strength. Because it meant they had learned to survive through intelligence and adaptability and sheer, bloody-minded determination. Sarah Chun smiled grimly at the screens and began to plan.